Maria Gunnoe, and Sarah Mulkoff. In order to have a climate-friendly event, we chose to have web participation from our out-of-state speakers and invited local speakers to come in person. We also have a panel of expert professors tonight, students, and activists here to discuss divestment at Michigan. We want to thank you to all of our coalition partners. We are a very broad and diverse set of students and student groups, including organizations such as Students for Clean Energy, Student Sustainability Initiative, and the Human Rights Through Education, along with countless other organizations. We'll start the evening off tonight with a brief presentation from some of our coalition members, Marissa, Serge, and Marion.
Hi everyone, I'm Marissa Solomon. I am a sophomore studying political science and sustainability, and I'm also a member of the Environmental Issues Commission and the Michigan Student Sustainability Coalition.
I'm Marion Berger. I'm also an LSNA sophomore studying activism in German, and I'm a member of the Michigan Sustainable Foods Initiative and the Student Union of Michigan.
Hi everyone, I'm Serge Farinas. I'm a second-year PhD student in ecology and evolutionary biology, and I do research on the impacts of climate change on alpine ecosystems.
So thank you all again for coming to dive in. The divestment campaign started in 2010 by a group of Swarthmore students. As you can see, just one divestment campaign in 2010. But this summer, Bill McKibben, who you'll be hearing from later, wrote an article that was a call to action to tons of universities and other community organizations to start divestment campaigns. Now, just at universities, there are 256 different divestment campaigns happening.
So you might be asking, why divestment? Why has this movement exploded over the past 6 months or so? The short answer is that we're not trying to harm the fossil fuel companies financially. We recognize that they are enormous corporations, probably some of the biggest corporations that have ever existed. And even if all universities divested, it might make a small impact on their portfolios, but they'd still be making tons of money because we all use gas and oil on a daily basis. So the general idea is to change the political climate by changing people's views of fossil fuel industries. We all know fossil fuel industries are bad, but it's time to really wake everybody up to the realities of what they are doing. And by promoting divestment across the nation and really making the fossil fuel industry something that's more stigmatized, we can change the political climate in Washington.
So the reason that divestment is happening at so many universities is summed up really well in this quote from Bill McKibben. If your college's endowment portfolio has fossil fuel stock, then your educations are being subsidized by investments that guarantee you won't have much of a planet on which to make use of your degree. That's pretty powerful, explains what we're doing. But then here at U of M, it's so important that we do this because we are a leader in climate science, and we have also made tons of commitments to sustainability. President Mary Sue Coleman has, in the past 2 years, put out a bunch of literature on why we are sustainable and why we need to become more sustainable. So it doesn't really make sense for us to be supporting such an environmentally destructive industry when we're doing all these other things.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a bit of the math behind divestment and what we've been able to find out about the university's investments. So we submitted a Freedom of Information request, and from that we were able to find out that U of M has over $900 million invested of its almost $9 billion endowment in the fossil fuel industry. And so by the fossil fuel industry, we mean, just anything associated with fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas extraction, processing, and transportation, all of that. So U of M's investments represent about 5% of all higher education investment in the fossil fuel industry, which is pretty significant if you think that there's thousands of colleges and universities across the nation, right? So over 2,500. Okay, so you may know that so 2 degrees is the limit of warming that is allowable, really, to avoid some of the more catastrophic effects of climate change. And it was estimated that this century we can only emit about 886 billion tons of CO2 in order to stay under that 2-degree limit. So this entire bar represents that 886 million. So far, unfortunately, we've already emitted a substantial amount of that. And that leaves us with about 500 billion tons left. Our university's investments, our university is invested in companies that have a claim on about, or more than half of that 500 billion tons that we have left. Okay, so what have we been up to so far? Well, we've solidified our goals. Goal number 1 is to get the university to disclose its current investments and freeze any future investments in the fossil fuel industry. Number 2, we want to get the university to divest from fossil fuel industry financial assets. And number 3, we want to get the university to invest in socially, environmentally, and economically responsible companies.
So far, we've been doing a lot, and we're going to continue to be doing a lot to get the campus engaged in our campaign. So the first thing is the petition. Hopefully you've all signed it so far. If you haven't, you should. If you go to divestum.org, click on Take Action, and then Petitions, and then Student and Faculty Petitions, you can log in. It's really easy to sign. And we really need as many students to sign this as we can, so we can show the administration that we have so much support. Also, faculty letters. We're working with faculty members to write letters specific to their departments, so they can send it out to their colleagues and hopefully gather as much faculty support as we can. Student government resolutions, we're working with CSG, LSA student government, and Rackham student government to get those passed. And then today's event and future events just like this.
We've also been working to build a really broad coalition across campus of student organizations that have signed on to the campaign. You can see these are just logos of some of the coalition or the groups that have signed on. But we'd love to see even more groups sign on and a more diverse coalition. So if you're in a student group that hasn't signed on yet, please do so.
Media outreach. Hopefully some of you read the Daily today and saw that we had a viewpoint published. If you haven't, you should read it. And we also hope to have future viewpoints and op-eds in the Daily and other newspapers and other forms of press as well.
We also have plans to be more involved with the administration with divestment. We're working on creating an investment working group to figure out exactly what companies the university can invest in after they've divested from fossil fuel companies. We're working to get alumni to sign donation pledges, which basically say that their donations to the university are contingent on whether or not the university divests from fossil fuels. And we will be attending Boards of Regents meetings in March and April, which you'll hear more about in a minute or two. Okay, well, that's now. Okay, so March 21st, we're going to have people speaking in the public comments section of the Regents meeting. On March 30th, we're going to have a training with Calvin Ho, who's the Great Lakes organizer for the 350 divestment campaign. And that's going to be on Saturday, and everybody is welcome. On April 3rd, we have a divestment day on the DIAG, during which we'll do a large photo petition campaign. And we'll be talking to our partner orgs to see if they want to set up tables on the DIAG with us. On April 6th, we will have a campaign representative training. And that's basically an opportunity for anyone, basically anyone here or anyone else who wants to get more involved to do so, to become sort of representative for the divestment campaign and to advocate for it all across campus. And then April 11th is Spring Fest, which will be another event on the DIAG with many different student orgs that we'll be participating in. And then on April 21st, we will be speaking at the Regents meeting again.
So how you can get involved, sign the petition, like I said earlier, really sign it, send it to all your friends, send it to everyone you know that goes here. Join the email list. Hopefully you all signed up for that. If you'd like to be on it when you came in, if you haven't, you can sign up for that on divestum.org as well. Sign up to be a volunteer, which you could have done when you walked in, but there's also a place to do that online. Be campaign representatives, sign your student group on as a coalition partner, and then the two easiest and most important things for you to do are like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For both of those, we're Divest and Invest Campaign, and you should send those to your friends as well. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, Marion, Marissa, and Serge. That was a great presentation. I'm going to introduce our next virtual speaker. Time magazine has called him the planet's best green journalist, and the Boston Globe said in 2010 that he was probably the country's most important environmentalist. Bill McKibben's the author of dozens of environmental books, and his recent article in Rolling Stone about the terrifying math of climate change was a gunshot that started a race to divestment across the country. He's the founder of the grassroots climate campaign 350.org, which has coordinated 15,000 rallies in 189 countries since 2009. And Bill last spoke here at Rackham last fall. So it's a privilege to get his attention back on UM so quickly. And although he's very busy traveling at the moment, he couldn't be with us live, but he took the time to make a special video just for us about our movement at UM.
Hello everybody, this is Bill McKibben. I very much wish that I was there with you in person because this work you're embarking on today in Michigan is of the utmost importance. You guys are going to be crucial leaders in this fight. You already are because you've gone a step further than many students have yet been able to. And that's in your work of figuring out how to work through the untransparent, opaque network of investments that many colleges have hidden away in recent years. And your sleuthing has helped you understand what a big part the university's endowment is playing in underwriting the greatest crisis that human beings have ever been involved in. Look, we got the news today that carbon dioxide emissions concentrations in the atmosphere are up 2.57 parts per million last year, the second biggest rise ever. A new study that came out today made it clear that the temperature is warming 50 times faster than any point in the history of civilization. A lot of this work started in research labs at places like the University of Michigan. And so this is one of the reasons that I want to lay out 3 reasons that I hope you'll bring to your trustees and administrators and everything else as you're making this case about why they must divest. The first is precisely because this is where this work came from. It's in our labs that we use the great brain power and technology and things at our disposal to figure out what it is that's going on. We've sounded the alarm, our scientists, in time. We're at the moment in human history when they had the sensors and the satellites and the supercomputers necessary to sound the alarm. Now we have to take that alarm seriously. I mean, look, if the university can't bring itself to divest, what kind of message is it sending? I think, I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not completely. If they won't divest, there's a certain point at which you got to ask, should they even be teaching courses on global warming anymore? Because what's the point in bumming everybody out if people won't take even the easiest, most straightforward action? And this is, by the way, easy action. All you're asking for is an immediate freeze on new divestments and 5 years to wind down current positions. That's not hard at all, but it would be powerful. It would send a strong symbolic message that you guys were no longer willing to cooperate, to collaborate, to be complicit in the ongoing wreckage of the climate around us and the lives that is already taking. Second argument, the university done a good job of starting down the path of greening the campus, talking about 25% reduction in carbon emissions, greening buildings, putting up LEED certified buildings, working on bikes and local food and all those kind of things. It's important, it's good, and logical consistency demands that one would therefore go ahead and also green the portfolio, especially since it's so much easier to do than changing the building stock and everything else. It's not like the endowment is some other thing. It's as much a part of the campus as the dining hall or the arts building or the field house or all the other things.
That was pretty much it, David.
All right, well, I'll sneak in here. I am very excited to introduce our next speaker. Maria Gunnoe is a fearless advocate for environmental and social justice. At great personal risk, she rallies communities that face the destruction of their natural environment and works to educate and build citizen advocacy. Maria began her work in her hometown of Boone County, where she educated and rallied her neighbors about the dangers of mountaintop removal in West Virginia Appalachian Mountains. Her message has impacted individuals and communities nationwide and has earned national acclaim as well. This past fall, Ms. Gunnoe was awarded the Wallenberg Medal here at U of M for her excellence in social advocacy. We are fortunate enough to have Ms. Gunnoe with us today via Skype. And before we talk to her, we're going to take a quick look at a video that she recorded on her phone from her backyard.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Oh my God.
Video first. It's like 30 seconds. So that's mountaintop removal, right, Maria? Is that mountaintop removal? Can you do that? Oh, there we go.
I just think about what's happened for energy in the United States today. And what's happened over the last 40 years in my lifetime. What's happened to our environment because of our energy consumption.
Hang on one sec. Hang on one sec while I plug this in. Yeah. It would be nice if this was over. No, but Discord. In there. Sorry, I lost. Yep, got it. Okay. Can you talk?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me.
Can you make it louder?
Great. Now I know what it feels like to be a robot. Okay. What's going on in southern Appalachia? In order to get to the coal that powers the grid, what's happening is they're using nearly 5.5 million tons of blasting material. It's ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel. That's the same mixture that was used in the Oklahoma City bombing. But yeah, they're using this mixture to get, they drill holes into the bedrock of the mountains and fill it with this mixture, and they explode the mountains. That's what you're seeing there in that video. That was actually only 3,500 feet from my home. My home is in Bob White, West Virginia. You can Google, go on Google Earth or Google Maps, or everybody's got iPhones. You can look at Bob White from above, and you'll see the natural mountains compared to the stripped away mountains, and you'll recognize that the cumulative impacts of the mountaintop removal going on around our homes over the past, really, mountaintop removal's been going on since the 60s, so I kind of grew up while this was going on. Most of the beautiful places that I knew as a young child have been destroyed, and this is all to create energy. It's hard to think that our president can say words like clean coal when I know deep inside that they're blowing up mountains to get to the coal that they're saying that they can burn clean. So, I mean, we have to look at our energy choices in the future. And the young people now will grow up over the next 40 years and realize that they should have done this a lot sooner. It should have been done. We are upholding a technology that can amaze people. I'm joining University of Michigan right now via Skype, and that's all being powered by coal that's being blown out of the mountains, and the mountains are being destroyed. And you know, the mountains are quite honestly the filters for our drinking water. The water that comes through my property, there's a small stream runs through our property, we call it a holler. And this stream has been polluted. The coal company filled the headwaters of the stream with a valley fill that's about 10 stories tall. What a valley fill is it's everything that they blow out of the mountain other than the coal. They put it into the adjacent streams and create a valley fill. And these valley fills they create pollution, selenium, toxic amounts of selenium, one thing. But yeah, they blow up the mountains and pollute our water to create energy in this country. And number one, this process cannot continue. How long will it take before it becomes your mountain in your backyard? Or your stream in your backyard? And you know, not only mountaintop removal, there's gas issues across the country. We cannot continue to rape the land and poison of the water that our lives depend on to flip on lights. It just doesn't make sense. We have to build a new plan for our future. And we have the technology and we have the intelligence to do this, and we must. It's not, we can't wait on the next president or the current president. We can't wait on someone else to do this. We have to do this ourselves. We have to show them that we mean business. We need a clean energy future with clean air and clean water. That will bring about jobs. We'll get jobs from that. It's going to take jobs to get the infrastructure in line. But we cannot continue to blow up mountains and poison water. And we cannot continue to burn coal over top of communities. Never a good idea. It's just, we're at a turning point. We have to recognize that. The young people in the room and people my age have to recognize that we're in a transition in our energy future, and we have to transition to renewable energy. We don't have a choice. There's something I want to suggest to everyone. It is the American Clean Energy Agenda. It's AmericanCleanEnergyAgenda.com. I think that everyone in the room, if you're interested in climate change as a major issue, I think this would definitely be something you'd be interested in reading and signing on to. And also, there's the AIC Act. That's AIC, Appalachian Community Health Emergency. The AIC Act is a bill that we have created, the people that are impacted. At ground zero, where they're blowing up mountains for coal. We have created a bill, have written a bill, and introduced it to the Senate. And you can find out more information about it at aicact.org. And what we're doing is we've introduced a bill to address the very real health issues that we're dealing with because of the companies blowing up the mountains over top of our homes. You'll notice the dust in that video. It don't just go away. It's the people, our homes are laden with this dust. Our lawns, our yards. I mean, it's a price that we're paying for people to flip on lights in this country. And it's a horrible price. No one should have to pay it. just because living here, there's 182% chance, more likely that you would be having a child with cardiac disease. There's 4,000 people a year that die unnecessarily. And mountaintop removal can be connected to those causes. So yeah, it's making us sick too. So visit the ACACT and do what you can to help us out there. And get involved, for God's sake, get involved in your energy future. This is your future. If we can't, I'm sorry that we've handed a coal-fired powered future off to the current generation, but the current generation has a choice to change that, and you have to. We can't keep doing this.
Everyone say thank you to Maria.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, next. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Sarah Mulkoff is the Midwest Energy and Climate Policy Coordinator for the National Wildlife Federation's Great Lakes Regional Center, just off Main Street here in Ann Arbor, where she works on defending Michigan's renewable energy standard. Also supporting energy efficiency programs in Ohio, advancing the Midwest's automotive recovery, and other clean air defense programs. She also coordinates the federal energy policy on topics ranging from carbon regulation, clean energy, and transportation for REAMP, a network of 8 upper Midwest states. Prior to working at NWF, she spent close to 3 years at Clean Water Action, advocating for clean energy and environmental health policies. Born and schooled in Michigan, she's committed to advocating for solutions for the Great Lakes region's transition to a clean energy economy. We are lucky to have Sarah joining us as our only in-person presenter of the evening. Welcome, Sarah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, and it's humbling to follow the first couple speakers, but I'm very happy to join you here in person. You hear me okay? Okay. So thanks so much for the introduction. I don't need to say a lot more about where I'm based, besides the fact that I wear a couple hats here. With my day work, I work on numerous clean energy topics across the region, across the Midwest as a whole. My heart's in Michigan, so the emphasis of my work tends to be here. And the other hat I wear, I had the logo for the Michigan Student Sustainability Coalition up here because I'm a board member, and I know several of you are involved currently with campaigns, and so really happy to also co-represent that group. And just to start off, I will clarify that my job with the National Wildlife Federation, we haven't specifically taken a stance on divestment issues altogether, but part of our campus ecology program is exploring the topic and really how we can help bring resources to some amazing student organizing that's been going on. So that's me. To kick things off, I just wanted to make the issue hit close to home. This is a picture I took up north when I went on a camping trip with some girlfriends. This is Lake Superior. Anyone's been to Lake Superior? Can you raise your hands? Awesome, a lot of you. Beautiful place, one of my favorite places in the state to visit. We just heard some really touching stories from Marie's backyard, but really the Great Lakes is what identifies a lot of us as Michiganders. These are in our backyard. And Lake Superior is warming at a faster rate than any other lake in the world. And that's astonishing, largely as impacted by rising temperatures from climate change. Michigan, as many of you know, has an over-reliance on imported fossil fuels, a fossil fuel industry, which in turn is leading to increased temperatures and, in effect, having negative effects on our ecosystems and our climates. For example, with the rise in temperatures in Lake Superior, it creates a better environment for the invasive species sea lamprey. More sea lamprey they prey on fish like trout and whitefish, fish that a lot of us are used to eating or having, as part of our diet. More sea lamprey on account of that warmer temperature will decrease some of these wildlife species. So just to kick things off, we have solutions here. We don't have to rely on fossil fuels industries. We want to protect our natural resources, and I think we have a general understanding increasing our use of renewable energy and energy efficiency is going to help reduce that carbon pollution and thus decrease the warming effects on Lake Superior and the areas that we love. With my REAMP hat, I bring up this slide just to show you that this REAMP network, it's 8 upper Midwest states, just to show you that while I'm based in Michigan, we work across this region intentionally because the Midwest has a lot of important characteristics that are similar. The Midwest in general has a heavy reliance on coal and imported fossil fuels. Well, we don't actually mine a lot of these in our own states. We import them from West Virginia and other places in Appalachia. Their Midwest states are key to national progress. We do have capacity for increasing vast renewable energy sources. A lot of wind energy available through the Great Plains, the Dakotas and Iowa. A lot of great wind capacity around the Great Lakes as well. We also have the history of the central role of auto and manufacturing that can easily be transferred into manufacturing and supply chain for producing wind turbines and things like that. Additionally, we have really, I named a bunch of nonprofits and foundations that we work with across this network, but also universities. We have amazing universities across the Midwest that are, that I think we have strong linkages through the nonprofits working with universities to really bring forth solutions to decreasing our over-reliance. And so as you could see in one of the previous slides with all the dots on the map there, I mean, there are campaigns taking place across this whole Midwest network. Looks like 8 colleges in Minnesota, 6 in Wisconsin, 5 in Illinois, 3 in Iowa, 5 in Indiana, 10 in Michigan, and 6 in Ohio. So that's just from the Go Fossil Free map. Just to give you a sense that this campaign is not just U of M. I mean, this is huge, sweeping across the Midwest. One last thing on the REAMP, a couple of our most relevant partners, Sierra Club will be joining us on the panel, as well as Ecology Center, both right here in Ann Arbor are working on this specifically, and as well as the local 350, Ann Arbor 350. So some local groups to be in contact with. The big picture, it seems like I'm probably speaking to a pretty educated audience about our reliance on coal. We've talked about this quite a bit, heard about our emissions, but really looking at the scope of the Midwest, again, those 9-ish states contribute to 25.25% of the U.S. global carbon emissions, which is really huge. We're disproportionately polluting, and that doesn't seem fair. So in addition, our Midwest sits on 144 coal-powered power plants. That might not be exactly updated, but the thing is that we don't actually mine the coal in many of our states. And then politically important swing states. Politically important for a few reasons, like, for example, in Michigan, our Senator Debbie Stabenow, she's the chair of Agriculture, Senate Agriculture. In our Congress, Congressman Dave Camp chairs the Ways and Means Committee, and Congressman Upton chairs the Energy Committees. These are huge federal responsibilities in Congress. Those elected officials, 3 of them, in Michigan, have really important influence on how we're framing our national energy policy. That leads me, okay, then just a few other stats. I don't need to go through all those, but just gives you a scope of where this dirty money in Congress, where it's starting to link together. For example, in the 112th session, it was $23 million in campaign contributions came from fossil fuel industries. And what I'm going to point out is that you can actually look up which candidates have been sponsored in any way by fossil fuel industries. So I took a look at my representative, Congressman Mike Rogers in CD8. And so there's this picture right in the middle. And this is a piece from Dirty Energy Dirty Energy Money. That's an interactive website. You can look it up, you can enter your zip code, and you can find your senators and representatives and really look at who backs their campaign. So the top dollar figures that stuck out, CMS, that's a typo, it's Consumers Energy, and DTE Energy are right near the top of the list. Interestingly enough, those are our largest utilities in Michigan. So those are some huge, huge campaign numbers. We're looking at over $500,000 have supported Congressman Rogers, just as one example. You can look up your representatives, and similarly, while this is the national scope, you can also go to the Michigan Secretary of State website and look up elections in Michigan, and you can track down your House and Michigan's House and Senate representatives too, and see which industries are backing their races, and where does that actually lead them to when it comes down to important votes on clean energy, or the opposite, hopefully not. Next, to connect this across the region, one example I wanted to talk about a little bit was tar sands. You know, I think a lot of you have been involved in some degree with this Keystone XL fight about expansion across the Midwest. What's specifically happening here in Michigan is you see that zoomed in map. There's a pipeline called Line 6B that went right through Marshall. You see there, and if you do remember, a few years ago in 2010, there was a massive oil spill in the river that in fact is still polluting the river 3 years later. There was a report today saying that the water is finally safe to drink, though a lot of people are really skeptical of that. Massive oil spill that took place because of lack of regulations on the pipeline industry. So just kind of a broad regional example showing that Midwest does have a reliance on importing these fossil fuels all the way from Canada, all the way from Western Canada, and that there's big money involved. Enbridge is a huge corporation, and that it's going to take a lot of organization and a lot of a lot of work to fight this effort, but it's definitely doable. So I just wanted to point out the tar sands issue is prominent here in the Midwest. Another topic specific to divestment is the Proposal 3 campaign. Anybody help out on Michigan's Proposal 3? Awesome, thank you. Thanks so much for your work. I know some of you know it as Michigan Energy, Michigan Jobs, so it's the official campaign name. We were looking to increase the state's renewable energy standard to 25% by 2025 through a ballot initiative. So we put a tremendous, wide, diverse coalition, put a tremendous amount of effort into educating the Michigan public that we need to increase the state's energy standard, electricity standard, through a ballot initiative. And as the results showed, there was strong support for renewables. However, people weren't too keen on doing it through a constitutional amendment. What else that we found out is, we found out through the campaign itself, is that we were severely outspent. Our coalition was largely comprised of nonprofits and businesses, and despite the strategic campaigning effort that went into it, we were still outspent, oftentimes 3 to 1, or sometimes even 5 times as much as we were spending on our campaign efforts. We can trace a lot of that money down to the utility companies, to major industries like Consumers Energy and DTE, and in some cases Enbridge as well. So here's some statistics that show the campaign overall pumped $40 million to literature and campaign pieces that actually confused the Michigan public and confused people with facts, incorrect facts about clean energy and where wind turbines would be put up, and really non-factually backed evidence to confuse Michigan voters and ultimately have a vote no campaign. So that's unfortunately what happened last fall. And despite the loss, and even though Michigan folks had always supported clean energy, even the president of Consumers Energy, the large corporation there, went on record expressing his support for renewable energy. So just a lot of people's hands tied, really. They want advanced renewables, but their pocketbooks are tied to some industry. Where else we saw this happen was with state lawmakers. years ago in 2008, we were introduced with our first clean energy bill, 10% by year 2015. It's quickly coming up on his time frame there. We know there are supportive lawmakers, some of whom are still in office, yet none of them could actually touch or talk about the issue of Prop 3, largely due to the fact that their campaigns, they also were on a re-election last fall. A lot of their campaigns are backed by the same large utility companies. So you can look up a lot of that information again through the Secretary of State website, but that's kind of how it's linked. To bring it back to what's going on here, I mean, huge national issues we're dealing with. Energy policy, it's not something easy to tackle. We're talking about importing coal from out of state and importing oil from across countries. These are huge topics, but we definitely have local solutions. It's amazing to see such a full room here. I just wanted to highlight some other things that are going on. Last month, the Michigan State Student Sustainability Coalition hosted a large conference at Central Michigan that brought over 100 students there, and one MSSC member, Marissa, she's leading a discussion similar to this one on how to start a divestment campaign at Central Michigan University. On the other picture there, members of Fossil-Free Minnesota have come together. I found this article that just earlier this month in March, they had a chance to meet with their Board of Regents at the University of Minnesota. They also call it the U of M. And so a convergence of a lot of campaigns in Minnesota are coming together, and this is what it looks like. It looks like people talking together in a room, organizing, putting together strategy, and ultimately presenting it to their Board of Regents or whomever they decide are these influencing targets. And so I know the U of M Divest project has done a lot of this headway already, and you're coming into it, I think, at a really, really great time. So I just want to point out that University of Michigan, you're not working alone. There's a lot of other campuses doing this work, and I can only encourage you to get in touch with other schools like Central Michigan University and Michigan State University just had their kickoff as well. Other campuses are working on this. It's always helpful to kind of share tactics and best practices, and that's kind of the last piece I want to say here. It's a photo from Michigan folks going down for that big move forward on climate rally in DC about the Keystone XL pipeline. Again, huge national issue, but these are Michigan students who came and they came back to their Michigan campuses and are ultimately pushing these campaigns and these progressive solutions to move forward. So educate yourselves. Don't feel that you're alone. There's a lot of campuses doing this. You folks already talked about the training on March 30th. And then lastly, the Michigan Student Sustainability Coalition has a working group specific to divestment topics. And so they meet via conference calls, and that's a really good way to hook up with these other students from Central and Michigan State and a few others that are working on similar campaigns. One last thing on the regional piece is that REAMP also has a youth caucus, a Midwest youth caucus that also provides a chance for Midwestern youth to come together on conference calls pretty much and talk about campaign organizing and strategies that they're doing on their campuses in Minneapolis or St. Paul and different cities across the Midwest, just to share strategies and tactics, because this work is really, really important and there's a lot to do. So I'm really glad you're all here. Thank you.
All right, well, we've been really fortunate to have a number of speakers. We're now going to have a panel of experts sort of speak to various aspects of the divestment campaign and the fossil-free movement in general. So I'm going to give just a brief introduction, and when I say your name, just come up to the panel. So we have Professor Knute Nadelhoffer here. He's been a professor with the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, and he's a director of the University of Michigan's Biological Station for the past 10 years. And he's here to answer your questions on climate science and climate change in the Midwest region. So I'm just going to introduce everybody, and then you'll each have a minute to say something. We have Brad Van Gilder here as well. He has a long history working with environmental nonprofit groups. He can address energy infrastructure questions and community organization as well. We have Sarah Mulkoff, who you have already met. We also have Daniel Marson here. He's a PhD candidate in economics and a member of our board, and just last year ran a primary campaign against John Dingell for the seat representing Michigan's 12th congressional district. He can answer your questions about the university endowment and the economics of divestment. Finally, we have Megan Pfeiffer and Dana Rollinson here as undergraduate student leaders, both members of the board. They can answer your questions about getting involved with the Divest and Invest campaign here at Michigan. So everybody please take a minute to briefly address the area that you are focused on, and then we'll take questions.
Well, my name is Brad Van Gilder, and work as organizing representatives for the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. I've worked as a community organizer for about the last 15 years. Prior to that, I was a college physics professor. I wanted to add 3 points. I'm working directly with students on the MSU campus, and because they have a large coal plant on their campus. In fact, it's the largest coal plant on a campus in the United States. And actually, with their divestment campaign, they've actually been pretty successful in getting information, and I think it's important to highlight that MSU is actually more transparent in releasing information than the University of Michigan has been. Second, I got the green light this afternoon from my supervisor to offer resources to support your campaign from the Sierra Club, so I'm happy to do that in any way that I can. Third is that I think it's extremely important with any campaign that you have a local component to that campaign, and that so of course you've got a local target here with the University of Michigan, and you're talking about divestment at the University of Michigan, but the reason, the motivating force behind it is about all these fossil fuel extraction, et cetera, that's happening all over the world. You can bring that back to your own back door in your own local community by talking about the devastation that your own utility, DTE Energy, has in Southeast Michigan and Ann Arbor in particular, because that's the electricity source for the University of Michigan and Ann Arbor. They are heavily dependent upon coal. Almost 80% of their electricity is generated by coal, which is twice the national average. And they not only generate electricity from coal, but they also are part of the coal transportation services. And in fact, at one point in time, they actually owned a set of coal plants, coal mines to provide the coal to their plants. Their coal transportation services and coal operations corporate headquarters are based right here in Ann Arbor at the corner of Main and Williams. Nice, handy local target. I would offer a number of things. With regard to what Sarah mentioned earlier, there is actually a shareholder resolution before DTE, that May 2nd, their shareholder meeting, where there's a shareholder resolution for them to reveal their campaign contributions that they make to both campaigns, candidates, as well as ballot initiatives, so we can actually find out how much money they actually give to the various people who are the opponents of these things. So, and I'm working directly on that campaign, so if you're interested in being someone who can receive a proxy from a shareholder to actually go into the shareholder meeting and ask a question of the corporate executives, let me know.
Thanks, Brad. Knute?
Well, thank you all for inviting me and for organizing this. I think this student-led and student-designed initiative is just exactly what we need. So thank you all for coming. I'm an ecologist and what you might call a biogeochemist. And what I've been doing since I finished my graduate work in the early 80s is studying cycles of carbon and nutrients in Arctic ecosystems and forests. Well, how does that relate to what we're doing here? Well, one of the clear relations is that the Arctic and the forests that wrap the globe around North America, Europe, and Central and Northern Asia interact with the climate. And so studying these systems has led me to studying the impacts of climate climate on these systems and the feedbacks of these systems to the climate as a whole. In the Arctic, I could give you a very short science lesson, and it's going to be very short. But the Arctic is tremendously interesting. It's a store of a huge amount of carbon and peat. That peat carbon has been slowly stored since the last glacial advance. And when I started working in the Arctic in the early 80s, all measurements showed that the peat was continuing to slowly accumulate. As the northern latitudes have warmed more than the globe, that peat is being released as CO2 more than the plants are removing it from the atmosphere. And even more importantly, there seems to be big burps of methane, because this peat is wet and cold, and methanogens love that environment. They compete very well. And so we now have large amounts of methane, which we're just trying to measure coming out of the Arctic. Methane, of course, is a more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. So the Arctic's interesting. Temperate forests, on the other hand, are actually removing about 20% of all the fossil fuel emissions that we generate. So it's really interesting to study how the biota and the climate are interacting to help mitigate CO2 emissions. We don't know whether that's going to continue in a warming world. If it doesn't continue in a warming world, then those systems will no longer be providing us with a service, and we could actually have faster CO2 accumulation in the atmosphere than we do now. So that's a little bit of the science of what I do. And as director of the UN Biological Station, by the way, those Enbridge pipelines, the one that came south around Lake Michigan, one of them goes right through Biological Station property. And the Enbridge crews have been there kind of doing some, I think, prophylactic fixing of that pipeline. Anyway, hopefully that one will never leak.
Sorry, so did the university approve that it goes through the land, like the university has?
It's a utility right-of-way that's been there longer than I've been here on, in Michigan. So I don't know, but that's a good question. Maybe we could stop that right there, but I think that we need a lot of legal power to do that. And so I've been, since I came to Michigan, been involved more and more in looking at not only the biological implications of climate change on systems, but the human implications. I serve on the board of the Environmental Law and Policy Center of the Midwest, which I would like to just basically toot their horn a little bit. They have closed 3 80-plus-year-old power plants in Illinois this year as a result of their legal action. The Crawford and Fisk power plants in Chicago and the State Line power plant. These are dirty, dirty plants that emit mercury, particulates, aerosol. They've basically been grandparented in, we, being the ELPC, has been able to work to close those plants. None of the energy from those plants was actually being consumed in Illinois. It was all being sold to Ohio. So I've worked on climate change plans. I was one of multiple co-authors authoring a climate change in Chicago adaptation plan. Last year I wrote with 9 other authors a technical report for the National Climate Assessment U.S. Global Change Research Program on ecosystem impacts. Testified before the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and I have met and been engaged in discussions with some of those representatives who are heavily funded by coal and oil companies, and their actions are often in line with those companies. And my message, and I'm going to turn over the microphone pretty soon, but what I want to tell you from my perspective is that the science is solid. It's unequivocal. This movement, this initiative is based on sound science. You should all know that. And I want to tell you 9 things that probably you all know. We know the properties. So there's a huge disinformation campaign that's even bigger than the anti-Prop 3 campaign, which is designed to confuse everyone in this room and everyone in this country about what climate change is and what the drivers are. The megaphone is big and the dollars are big, but it's not complicated. The first thing you'll hear is the science is complicated. Well, a lot of it is, but a lot of the core information is very clear and well supported by science. CO2, we've known the radiative properties of CO2 for over 100 years. We know that carbon dioxide reflects infrared heat that's that's emitted from the Earth's surface after the sun hits it. We know that CO2 reflects that in all directions, and some of that comes back to heat the lower atmosphere and the surface of the Earth. Unequivocal. Svante Arrhenius, Swedish biochemist 100 years ago, wrote a paper about it, and physics and instrumentation have verified that. And we also know that methane and nitrous oxide, two products of carbon fuel combustion, are even more powerful than CO2. The only reason we don't talk about them as much is they're at much lower concentrations, but they have measurable and important effects on the climate. So we know the properties of greenhouse gas. That's number one, unequivocal. We know that they're increasing as a result of carbon fuel combustion. There's no question about that. The economics show us that. We know we're emitting about 10 billion metric tons of carbon as CO2 in the atmosphere. No question. We know the Earth is heating based on ground-based and satellite measurements, and we know it's been about 1 degree Celsius in the last century, or about 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are committed to at least a 3-degree rise through the next century, even if we do all the things we should do, and we could see a 10-degree increase by the end of your lives. That's pretty amazing. We know that rain and snow intensities and distributions are changing. We have more intense storms, more droughts on average worldwide, and certainly in the Midwest, the data show that storm economies are in danger. They're jeopardized. And finally, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Navy, the Army, actually have all recognized that climate change is a national security risk. So it's like, okay, where should we be? We shouldn't be talking about the science, even though I'm a scientist. We know the science. What we don't know is the solutions. And the question for you all, and me, and everyone is the Divest Invest campaign in line with the solutions that we need to see. That's my science talk. I'm leaving it.
Thank you, Knute. We heard from Sarah already.
Yeah, can I say something just real brief?
Yeah.
You guys heard my piece, but I want to underline one of the things Marie said, that this is such an important issue that has to be cross-generational. You know, it's invigorating, it's awesome to see young people, you know, working together, but we need to work with more people on this. I was a student organizer not so long ago, and I was part of, you know, the first National Power Shift in 2007, and we got it. I mean, we were activated students working on these topics, but it's never been more urgent, you know? Not as a scare tactic or anything, but like, it is you guys, it is you students who are undergrads or graduate students right now that have to be the ones leading this charge to make decisions to not have an irreversible future of more devastating effects. So I just want to really undertone that urgency.
Yeah, I would add that this campaign is about helping all of us become advocates, better advocates for our climate as well as, you know, addressing this one issue on our campus. I'll let Dan say something and then open up for questions to our panel.
Okay, so I'm Dan Marson, PhD candidate in the economics department here at the University of Michigan. It was also mentioned that I did run for Congress, that is true, against John Dingell last year in the Democratic primary. Going off of the chart, yeah, he didn't even believe me when that was mentioned before. The chart that Sarah put up before about how Mike Rogers took $500,000 from dirty energy in the last 10 years, John Dingell took twice that. He took $1 million in the last 10 years from dirty energy. I ran against him. My number one issue was there should be pollution tax on anything that pollutes, and everybody kind of laughed at me. But anyway, you shouldn't think that economists think that it's going to kill the economy, because I defy you to find an economist that thinks that there should not be a pollution tax immediately. So I just want to say a few things. Number one, the $918 million figure of fossil fuel investments at the university out of the total 7 to 10 billion, whatever, changes all the time. That's a minimum number because there's a lot of stuff like venture capital and other things that we actually don't know the content of yet. So we're trying to get more disclosure from the university. The second thing is that the risk is not that high from divesting. It's not going to immediately knock all the fossil fuel investments down 20% and then we'll have to take an enormous cut when we sell everything. It's not that risky. And also just divesting from fossil fuels in general, the remainder of the portfolio would not be enormously more risky. You know, the portfolio loses value all the time. We don't lay off faculty when the portfolio loses value, so the portfolio can handle swings. And The third thing is that if we took the $918 million in fossil fuels and invested it all in clean energy right now in some fashion, that would be equal to half of the United States federal government research budget on renewable energy at the moment. So there are a lot of ways that we could invest it. We could invest it directly in clean energy, like Ohio State buys wind energy from a wind farm directly. They get way more wind energy than we do because we get none, and they get like a quarter. So we could buy a fraction of a wind farm with part of the endowment, or we could just throw everything in an index fund that doesn't include fossil fuels. It'd be very easy to do. So it's not very complicated. So that's all I want to say.
Thanks. So I'll open it up for questions. Try to have an idea who you want to ask, but if you don't know who, then I'll direct it to someone. Questions? Yeah. Oh, we have a light. You can turn it on.
Well, I have a question for Megan and Dana. I think we can talk about that also. But when is the Regents meeting again, and are we all invited? What time?
Okay, so the Regents meeting is on March 21st, and it starts at 3 p.m. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, it starts at 3 p.m. and there will be 5 students from the Divest and Invest Campaign speaking, and everyone is invited and should attend to really show the Regents that this is something that we're taking seriously and that there's a lot of student support for it.
Don't bring bags. You have to go through a metal detector and get patted down to get in there. So it becomes that.
Yeah, don't bring weapons.
It's very serious.
It's a very serious event. So, but you can bring signs, and we'll try to pass out stickers or badges or something so that we can all be in solidarity. That's next Thursday at 3. So.
Yeah, we'll send out an email to everyone too if you signed up on the papers outside.
Yeah, if you haven't signed up on our email list, please sign up on the way out. We won't spam you or anything, but we'll let you know all major important events throughout the end of the year and into the coming years.
Other questions? I don't think we need the microphone for questions if you just talk loud enough. Yeah.
So at the Regents meeting, I mean, ideally the Regents would go along with this, but if they don't, what reasons are they gonna, or do you anticipate they would have for saying no?
Dan?
I mean, they don't really like to do things immediately. So they always like to think things over, deliberate, right? Discuss things between meetings. Yeah, I mean, they just like to be careful with anything involving $1 trillion, right? Or not $1 billion, $1 billion. Yeah. Right, not $1 trillion. Yeah.
This is for Brad. Sorry, at the far right. You mentioned the energy company on Main and Williams.
Yeah, so it's DTE Energy.
Right.
So DTE Energy is the local utility that provides electricity and natural gas.
Yeah.
That's the regulated utilities. They're non-regulated businesses, the coal transportation services, their industrial projects that are very heavily polluting in terms of coal and petroleum coke. Those offices are located at the corner of Main and William.
You said they're having a shareholder meeting to see.
So their shareholder meeting for their main company is May 2nd in the city of Detroit. There's a resolution that's around political campaign contributions. There was a resolution that was introduced around greenhouse gas emissions. Unfortunately, the sponsor of that resolution withdrew the resolution about 2 weeks ago after they negotiated with DTE. We don't know the details of that negotiation yet. But if you're interested in going to that shareholder meeting, where I'm working on securing proxies from shareholders that would then give you the right to go into the meeting representing that shareholder and ask a question of the executives that are running the meeting.
And I think since Brad's in touch with us, we can get that out, get that information out to all of you who signed up to our email list.
And I could just suggest that maybe one potential interim goal is to look at whether the University of Michigan has significant investments in DTE Energy.
They do.
And so that could be one immediate local issue, is that the utility that is basically preventing you from doing better in your own sustainability goals, you are investing in. So you are basically investing money against your own, directly against your own objectives.
Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is more sort of a general question. I'm not sure exactly who to direct it to. I'm sure you could all give me a little bit of feedback just based on your own viewpoints. But I'm really involved with student government here on campus, and so a lot of my friends who are not informed about what's going on campus often ask me about what's happening on campus. What would be the best way, do you think, to get people interested and to care about this cause for people who wouldn't come to a meeting like this? You know, what's the best way to get people to really look at the issue and get involved, to want to get involved?
Why don't I start? Yeah, with Sarah.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one best way to do it or not, but one of the things that I could recommend at the top of my head is word of mouth. You know, that's a lot of ways how things spread throughout a campus. All of you can't probably attend all the student groups that you're interested in, but you know, it's most likely other students are interested in this but couldn't be here today. But I would just really encourage you folks, now that you've been more educated on the topic, to talk to your roommates, talk to your classmates. You could even ask to do class presentations, you know, at some of your classes. But really keep spreading them out verbally, and then of course virally. You know, everything spreads online. I'm sure you have a group and a Facebook page and things like that. Just keep talking about it, keeping more folks interested with actionable items like, hey, there's a meeting this next whatever day. Everybody's invited. Those kind of things.
Dana?
Yeah, Megan and I are both the student outreach representatives who are trying to work with various student groups on campus to get involved as partner organizations and work on the campaigns. And something that we've been trying to do is tailor some of like the reasons for joining the campaign to the people that we're trying to appeal to. So if you're appealing to like public health students or a public health organization, you want to talk a lot about the health effects of coal and fossil fuel burning and what it's doing to people. So I think tailoring and like focusing on people's specific interests might make them, you know, want to be more involved and have like a personal investment in the issue within that.
Yeah, and I guess if they can't attend meetings, but they still like want to have their voice heard, you can tell them to sign the petition online, which is like a really easy way just to like get involved and show like your support.
I would kind of follow up to that for Knute with, we also want to reach out to more faculty, and being a faculty member, how would you suggest is like an appropriate way to engage more faculty on the issue of divestment and the university?
Well, first of all, let me say, I think, you know, faculty always have an agenda, and it's always complex. And I think the best place for this movement to have been initiated is with students, because you all are making a really crystal clear and compelling statement. So, and I think faculty, you know, you all take classes from people, and you can all talk to them during or after class, and let them know you're concerned. Let them know that you would like them to write a letter of support in line and in support of the overall student petition. I haven't signed the student petition. I think it's a student position, right?
Yeah.
Petition. So I know there are groups of us who are waiting to write letters once that petition is submitted. So I think you can count on a lot of faculty support, and you know, go to your classes and talk with your professors and lecturers and your GSIs.
Just a quick note, the petition can be signed by anyone that has an @UMich account, and we also have a second petition for interested community members, parents, alumni, anyone that doesn't have that account, and that's all on our website.
Right, so there are two petitions, one for a unique name holder and one for anyone who doesn't have that.
But I think faculty would be able to sign it if they have an @UMich email address.
You mentioned alumni, and one thing that the administration responds to is large alumni input. So, you know, if you want to focus on alumni, that's a very good thing. They'll listen to you for sure, but
how would you recommend doing alumni outreach?
Well, Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's.
We were working on that.
Yeah, actually, with the MSU campaign, we actually have worked on alumni outreach. And one really good way to do that is a lot of alumni clubs all over the country have their own Facebook pages. So if you know people who live in a particular place or alumni, start getting them to post onto their local alumni Facebook page talking about this, and just basically build it off of all those various alumni networks that are out there. That's worked very successfully at MSU.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, considering the urgency of the issues and considering the limitations of our time here at a very competitive university, at what point do we need to actually stop the classes and talk? At what point, back in the 60s they had teach-ins and they had sit-ins. They stopped to do something. And I feel like there's some parallels there and perhaps something to learn from that. And I just wanted to see.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and I don't know what it takes. I'll just admit, of course. I think you need the majority of campus, of your students, at least informed. At least half of the student population needs to be informed and hopefully in support of what we're trying to do. We're at a starting point. Sounds like the petition's going awesome, but I think there at this point just needs to be a lot more knowledge. Continue spreading the word. Continue doing articles in the daily and such. And I don't know how you measure Windows half or so of the population know what's going on here. It's sort of a determinate point of time, but I think you need a broader movement. The movement's strong to begin with, but you need to talk to any stranger on the street and that they can pick up on this before it comes to that. That's kind of my initial reaction.
Well, I think that's a great question. I think actually you all are you're in a nice catbird seat. You can look back on the 60s and 70s, which were, sometimes, and that's the time I lived through, sometimes that's held up as a kind of a standard, but frankly, that was very confrontational. And, the confrontation, it's arguably justifiable, but I think the strategy you're pursuing is actually more compelling. Bill McKibben's 3 points that this work came from the University of Michigan and other universities. It's part of what we do. So what kind of message are we sending? And do we want to be complicit in driving what we know is happening? And getting, that's not as much of a sacrifice in terms of time, in terms of disruption, in terms of generating confrontation, which, when people are in confrontations, they tend to circle the wagons and fight. And I think what you want to do is engage. What I see you're doing is getting people involved in articulating why this is important, not just stopping everything. So
we have about 5 minutes left. Well, we're supposed to end around 7:30. We can stay as long as the panelists can stay, and do you guys want to stay? Also, if you're leaving, then take more food because we have way too much. You had a question.
I just had a comment about how to connect with alumni. I know LinkedIn is a great resource.
Yeah.
Somehow I got into an alumni circle on LinkedIn, and I get an email every single day from them and having conversations with each other. And I think that would be really great because it shows that you're professional and that you know how to network. And I would be surprised if the majority of alumni weren't on LinkedIn.
Thanks. Yeah.
So you mentioned before when talking about this organization that you're organizing an investment working group. And so this plan that you're developing, how much of it is going to be completely from student initiative and how much, is the proposal for reinvestment, is it going to be a dialogue with the university? Or is it going to be something that we formulate and then present to them as a kind of polished proposal for reinvestment? And just kind of what is the path, what is the part that the reinvestment plan looks like?
Yeah, is that for me?
Sure.
Okay. So
I can help if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it seems kind of like both. The better, more professional your plan looks, the more seriously it'll be taken. But everything can be modified by you know, it's not like the regions can either take exactly the plan as presented or nothing, right? So they can always modify whatever. We don't really have a great idea of what we want to do. Well, I think we should buy a wind farm, but the group as a whole doesn't really have a great idea of what we want to put the money into. So I think there's a lot, yeah, there will be a working group where we talk about what to do.
And something that they did with the tobacco divestment is the regents created this working group, or an ad hoc committee, that over a span of about 4 months, it was comprised of students, faculty, and administrators, and they put together this report about like the divestments in tobacco, and then over a 5-year period, they worked on divesting from the tobacco industry and then reinvesting in different companies. And so I think that was something that we would hope the regents would establish this working group that would be like comprised of students who are really involved in the campaign, as well as like people who might know a little bit more about investments.
You had a question?
Yes. So in terms of, it kind of goes with what she was saying, in terms of working with the administration, we ask that first they freeze their investments, but then also that they reallocate that money into more sustainable, clean, safer alternatives. You talked a lot about wind farms, but what are some of those other viable alternatives?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing you could do is just take the S&P 500 index and just buy all the companies in the index in proportion to their value in the index, except for the fossil fuel companies, and then just scale up everything to 100%, right? And then that would basically do it. That's one way, that's the easiest way. You could also come up with some idea of what a sustainable company is, which is really fuzzy. So that's why you would need to have a lot of discussions and like what is, what isn't. That gets more complicated.
There are models that we can follow that, I mean, the whole city of Seattle has committed to divesting their pension funds, which is a lot of money from the whole city. Ann Arbor is the Energy Commission, we learned last week, has looked into divesting the city's pensions and investments, which is just getting underway. So we could try to see what those other leaders are doing in terms of where they're putting their money after divestment. Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing that you keep in mind is that the scale of the investment we're asking talking about is much larger than anything else we've seen in the industry. $1 billion is just gigantic compared to a lot of other campaigns. There's about $30 million, $10 million. The colleges have so far had a total of $10 million. And so we're gigantic, obviously. And so it's going to be hard to take that $1 billion and put it just in public funds, public equities. Because right now a lot of that is tied up in private equity as it is. So rather than just saying, oh, we're going to support companies that are socially responsible, that are already well established, we can follow the same model that they did already with the fossil fuel industry and put the money in private startups. So, you know, if it's at a wind farm, would be a great example. But doing that many places around the country, around the world, putting it into new solar farms, putting it into new technology development, all companies that need this start capital, which we all know right now capital is hard to come by. And like you said, here's Michigan, $900 million. It's half of U.S. government funding to the industry per year. It could be a big bump in funding to people who need it the most. So there's a lot of creative ways we can actually get this money dispersed after divest. But the first problem is getting the money out of where it is currently, sitting in oil fields, coal fields, natural gas fields, and moving it over to renewable energy.
2 more questions. Is that okay for everyone? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I'm into sustainability, and I recently spent my spring break in West Virginia, in an area that is like dominated by coal mines. A lot of mountaintop removal is going on right there. And it was interesting because the community is so dependent on these mines and these companies, and coal mining is the #1 employer in West Virginia, and the #2 is Walmart. So I guess something that I'm like struggling with is like going to a cleaner energy source, but then also like what do you tell these communities that depend so heavily on coal mines?
Brad, can you talk about it?
I mean, the thing is you're going to have a reinvestment strategy, clearly. You know, and you're going to have to come up with an alternative to just coal by itself. There are models for that where you actually, so there's a group called the Blue-Green Alliance, and they're having their national conference in Washington, D.C. next month. And it's a coalition of 10 major labor unions and the 4 largest environmental organizations. And they try and tackle these kinds of just transition questions about how do you work directly with the labor force, the local community, and the current business to try and change those kind of jobs that you have available. It's going to, in that case, where you have such an extreme dependence on a single industry, it's very, very difficult. But you have some good examples, like say, for example, the city of Pittsburgh reinventing itself with the changeover in the steel industry. And there's the TransAlta case in Washington, where the last coal plant in the state of Washington was they went through a negotiation process for closing that. And that was a city where they were heavily dependent upon that plant as a major employer and tax base. So but you're going to need to have government involved in terms of being able to come up with alternative job sources and creating the opportunities for being able to make the investments for alternative jobs.
Sarah, did you want to add to that?
Brad had it spot on. I just wanted to commiserate in a way that I totally understand. I was visiting family in Eastern Kentucky, and you drive around, you see bumper stickers that say things like, I support coal because coal supports me. That's just how it is. It's just coal supports families and industries. So it's a difficult topic to even talk to people I know, like extended family to some degree. Allison didn't know a lot of the technicalities of how you do wind and how you do alternative energies, because there's so little of it in that part of the region right now. And so I was at the very minimum trying to help provide her with some really basic education of how things like alternative energy can work and where wind makes sense. And so it was just kind of feeling what you mean by speaking to local people. It's really important to put yourself in their shoes too.
Actually, I thought of another very important example is that during the Clinton administration, when a number of major military bases were being closed, where they went through there was actually legislation that went through Congress for reinvestment in those communities, and that was a huge project in terms of some of the places where there were very large military bases where they were completely closing them, and the local community was completely dependent upon all the economic activity that came from that military base. That would be another very good example for being able to look at how to go about doing that.
Robin.
Just another example of that tobacco industry. Again, you bring it up time and time again. The tobacco industry put a lot of people out of work because they were farming tobacco. And maybe it's easy to think, oh yeah, you just throw the seed in the ground. That's not necessarily how it works. But I think there probably were some transition issues there as well. I mean, that might be another place to look for alternatives to that industry.
But this won't happen overnight, as we all know. So taking decades to transition, which it'll probably take, coal miners won't have to find a new job tomorrow, and it's more likely that just our generation won't start being coal miners anymore. But people who are already coal miners will probably still be able to be coal miners until they retire, or maybe retire 10 years earlier than they expected. But it's going to take a long time as well.
And divestment won't bankrupt these companies. It won't, even if we do have $900 million invested. These companies are still going to be there. But the point of divestment is putting, our thoughts into actions, and as a socially responsible institution, then being socially responsible in our investments.
Last question. Yeah.
What role might law students play in this effort? I'm meeting with a law student tomorrow to talk about it.
Law students, yeah.
Okay, well, we actually have the Environmental Law Society signed on as a partner org. And so, they hopefully will start playing a bigger role. But we had a law student help us with the Freedom of Information Act request. And so I think with like the legal portion of all of this, they like law students can be very helpful in providing advice and like mentorship, I guess.
And also, I think in terms of the letters that we write officially to the Board of Regents, to administrators, getting help from law students who have experience in more formal language, where when we see something in one way, it might be completely different to someone reading it as a lawyer. So that kind of help obviously would be very positive.
Cool. Well, we're going to end here. Thank you to everyone for coming. Thanks to our panel. Yeah, more food.